Hello and welcome to Craft of the Draft. This episode has our first mock draft of 2025. We're going through the top 10 picks. We might have some match bids in there, plenty that comes out of that. But what else did we talk about?
Yeah, there was plenty to unpack thereafter. Vic Metro played against the Allies on the weekend. The small forwards absolutely dominated, so they get plenty of praise, and there were plenty of others who put their names on the map. We talked all things North Melbourne and all things Melbourne in the latest of our AFL club-by-club draft analysis, and there were some weekend highlights as well, spearheaded by a player who has put himself on the Vic Country radar for the Gippsland Power. Tune in to find out who.
Also, if you want your normal fun AFL content, head over to the Hideout and be sure to like and subscribe. Alrighty, our first mock draft of the year, we are looking at just the top 10 picks for the clubs currently outside of the top 8 on the AFL ladder, and we will have the order. So you'll take 5 selections and I'll have 5 selections. We'll split them up. I don't know who Jonty's picking, nor does he know who I'm picking, and we will also have some bids in there for club-tied talent.
Yep.
So if there is a bid, we'll kind of move those picks into that place, and it'll probably end up being more than 10 selections.
Yeah.
But we won't go anywhere past the Bulldogs at pick 10. So they're currently the one in that spot. If we did this last week, it would have been Freo. So it's very tight from probably the Bulldogs upwards. But the first 9 selections, those clubs will probably expect to have a top 10 pick for this year's draft. So just going through the order, pick 1 with West Coast, I'll make that selection.
Yep.
Now, as picks 2 and 3 will be yours with Richmond. That second Tigers selection tied to North Melbourne. Pick 4 at St Kilda, I'll have that. You'll have picks 5 and 6 for Essendon, the second one of those tied to Melbourne. Pick 7, Hawthorn, that'll be me. Pick 8, Gold Coast, that'll be you.
Yep.
And then pick 9, so that Gold Coast pick was obviously tied to Port Adelaide. The Hawthorn pick is also tied to Carlton. And then pick 9, Sydney. Pick 10, the Western Bulldogs. So we have really 8 clubs in the top 10. So a few of those obviously that traded hands last year. Plenty to play out, so we'll get into that shortly.
And we know obviously there's the potential for selections to change hands in the trade period, and then some potential free agency implications that could lead to some clubs here getting some more picks. And like you say, the ladder can change as well. Yeah. So the final draft order won't look like this. But if it did, this is what our mock draft would look like.
It's probably not going to look anything like this. Like you said, West Coast might have pick 2.
And not to mention, there's a bit of the Talent League season still to play out.
There's
Waffle
heaps
Colts
to go.
So,
But let's get into it. I'm on the clock. West Coast pick 1. I won't be like normal draft years where the number 1 pick takes 5 minutes, even though they should have made their decision up weeks before the draft.
Yeah.
So I'll get straight into it. Pick 1, West Coast. I'm taking Willem Dersma. Overall, Gippsland Power talent. I think many clubs could have him as the number 1 pick. There'll certainly be a number of names in contention at the top of West Coast's list. But I have Willem Dersma for many reasons. Versatility is obviously one of his leading factors, and it's not the factor that he'll get picked on necessarily. I think he, in West Coast eyes, could be the top talent in this year's draft if they're picking best available, which they certainly could be doing. But when you talk about the positions he can play, played a lot of key defensive roles in this year's champs, can play through midfield, can play forward. I think you look at West Coast season, if they had drafted a player like this last year, they lose Tom Barrass, and they don't have Jeremy McGovern for the second half of the year. They don't have Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman for most of the year. And then they lose Elliot Yeo for what looks like the whole season. Dom Sheed, the same, now retired. So if they had Willem Dersma or a player like him this time last year, he'd be being able to fill a lot of roles. And I think that's certainly something he's going to be able to do for them. Clean kicking, great mark, great decision maker, good athlete, agile. Ticks a lot of boxes, and it certainly doesn't hurt that he's close friends with Harley Reid. So hopefully he could be something that helps him stay as well. But that's not the reason they pick Willem Dersma. It's the talent, the upside, and probably a ready-made contributor for them as well. So something that they'll certainly want is these young players who can come in and get roles quite quickly. Which is obviously something they've had to do over the last few years. So pick 1, West Coast will take Willem Dersma.
Really well summed up. Now I have pick 2 and 3, so it just makes sense, obviously, if I'm going to be doing Richmond's pick 2, that I do Richmond's pick 3 as well, and that's the same reason why I'll be doing both of Essendon's picks. So with pick 2, I've selected Kripaduff Tytler for the Tigers. I wouldn't select a ruck if it was your only selection, probably. as a general rule of thumb in the top 10, just because I think the importance or significance of that role doesn't warrant it. But given that Richmond do have 2 selections, we know they obviously had their bounty of first round selections last year and they overlooked a ruck. They do need someone to succeed Toby Nankervis in the coming years. I think Cooper Duff-Tytler is that perfect sort of player, can also impact forward, aggressive. He's obviously really athletic as well, 200 centimetres of pure talent. And then at pick 3, I think they need someone who's sort of light on their feet, agile in the midfield, to complement obviously Sam Lawler and Josh Smiley in the long term. They've got the 2 big bodies, so I've gone with Sam Grill.
Okay, you might have been top of the list on one of them. We will talk after the draft's done.
But we'll talk a bit more later about some aspects of Vic Metro versus Vic Country this weekend. He's probably one that would like a big performance this weekend, but I think we've seen through the early part of the season some of the traits that he's got. He doesn't need to have a lot of the footage to have a real impact, really clean, and again, a really high upside pick that can really influence with not only his disposal, but his run and carry out of the midfield.
All right. Well, there's a couple of nice picks for the Tigers. Like you said, they'll complement the players that they picked up last year really nicely. And you also, with that CDT pick, kind of helped me not have to explain why I overlooked him and went for Dersma as well. I think a ruckman at pick 1, especially with where West Coast are at, not a certain kind of avenue for them to go down in such a critical draft for them.
Pick 4.
Pick 4. So St Kilda at pick 4, and I think it's to no surprise I'll be putting in a bid. For another academy player. This one will be Dan Annable at Brisbane. So Brisbane will come into pick 4. I'm trying to figure out this on the sheet, but Brisbane will take Dan Annable, match that bid. They do have a nice amount of points this year. They might have to get a little bit creative. Obviously, they don't have a top 10 pick, so nothing in this order will change too much outside of everyone moving down one. But I don't know if we have to talk on Dan too much, just given we're more focused on the Saints, but it'll be a nice pickup for the Lions. And I guess why the Saints might look at him is his role through midfield, what he's capable of doing both inside and outside, and a player Ross Lyon might like. In his side, unfortunately, tied to the Lions, just like they did last year, trying to get Leo Lombard. Match bid, and they'll certainly move on. I'm not going to do 2 bids. I was tempted, certainly tempted. And there was a few names on top of Annable that I could have looked at for the Saints, and I certainly assume that they'll be matching a bid on their first pick. But the player I'll be taking, I have got about 8 names here trying to pick for the Saints, will be Josh Lindsay out of the Geelong Falcons. A player that I think will really nicely fit Ross Lyon's system, and we've seen the type of players. Toby Travalia, quite similar last year, but Lindsay can certainly move into midfield, but will play maybe a bit off halfback and some clean ball movement. It also could be a selection made depending on where Nazar Wangani Miller is playing this time next year. So there'll be a few moving parts before the Saints have to make their first round selection. But I have them taking Josh Lindsay from the Geelong Falcons as a nice clean kicking, nice moving halfback midfield option.
I think we've both stolen our picks. So we'll talk more on it. But that's the way draft night goes. So my next 2 picks, Essendon, I am going to put in some bids here.
Here we go.
So
it's going to be, if you think it's going to take a little bit for us to get to pick 10, just wait till draft night.
Exactly.
The first round. So there's going to be a bit happening here.
Pick 5, bid on Zeke Uland, obviously the prodigious talent who's not played any footy yet this year as a result of injury. So Gold Coast will get him, and then I'll put a bid on for Dylan Patterson as
Double
well.
Up. All right. I think I was going to do one of those in some of my next picks. So what that'll do, we'll actually get rid of Gold Coast selection at pick 8.
Clearly, they're not going to
have that coming into the draft. They might use it to maybe move up further, but I'd like to think we'll just clear that out entirely, and that'll move Sydney up in a way for now. And the Dogs up, but at the same time they'll get pushed back a couple of spots. So that was with your first Essendon selection. So so Gold Coast will be matching bids for both. Ulan was first, and then Patterson as well. So a bit like what Sydney did in the 2022 draft. I think they matched 2 or 3. They forced 2 or 3 bids and then ended up trading their first round selection. So Essendon will be a bit of a menace, and then as we've seen between pick 4 till 6 or 7, there we've got 3 match bids. So Essendon back on the clock with what was pick 5 is now, I'm thinking, is pick 8. Who are you taking?
I am taking Noah Hibbins Hargreaves. It gives them a bit of outside run, a bit of outside flair. I think they've got a good sort of blend of young talent off that half back line. You look at your Zach Johnsons and your Archie Roberts, who are starting to establish themselves, Angus Clark too, in the lineup. Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves would be that perfect connector forward of the ball. We know that they've got Isaac Kako, Hassan Al-Ashkar, they'll hope can be the sort of deeper small forwards of the next generation, and they'll get access to Adam Swade at this draft as well. So I think Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves would be that perfect running player who can connect up quite well, and his running game and ability to seize his moments we've talked about this year, really good overhead as well. So I think he suits that modern style of half forward / winger that you really, really want, with his athleticism too. And then with my next pick, I'm taking Sam Cumming.
Okay. I thought he might be one of the ones for the Bombers.
He's not the wild card that I sort of floated off air. I'll tell you who that is later. But he's one who I think he's been underrated all season until probably the last couple of weeks, and people are starting to really see what he's capable of. We've seen him transfer his form to Samful senior level, but he's capable of playing forward. He's capable of playing midfield. He's that Isaac Heaney clone. And I think that Essendon would really relish a player of his caliber. They have got some midfielders on their list at the moment. We are well aware that they're not short on depth in that area, but I think elite A-grade young talent through the midfield, he's someone that will certainly graduate into there after probably starting his career as a forward, and just offers a lot of class. When you look at a draft crop that isn't necessarily top heavy with talent, you've got to look at best available as well.
Yeah, that's left Hawthorn, who now have picked 10. Yep. So we're also starting to get a good idea of the Hawks, who are coming in with what was, I think, pick 7, now out to pick 10. But the Swans are at pick 11 and the Dogs are at pick 12. So we have 3 selections to make.
Yep.
And I might touch on this a little bit after the draft's done, but the Hawks have certainly been moving down their list quite quickly, while I had about 5 or 6 names. And they're only picking at 10th overall. So with Hawthorn's selection, I'm going to take Fred Rodriguez out of WA. I had a number of names that would really match the Hawks' style and what they're trying to get. And I think a little point of difference in midfield was one of them, trying to look away from the John Newcombe types and the James Warples that are those really heavily contested, and a player that can play a little bit outside as well. So they need a bit of balance, bit in that Will Day mould, and I think Fred Rodriguez will be a player that they'll rate quite highly, and at the same time can add a little bit to midfield, and doesn't have to be straight away. I think he, like, what we're seeing with Cam McKenzie and Josh Ward, might take a little bit of time, as those two still are, but they'll be adding to their midfield. And as we spoke on last week's episode, how difficult it was to try and fit a match for Hawthorn and what they're looking at. So that ended up being a hard selection, I thought, in the end, given that the list of players I had at the top of their list, but landed on Fred Rodriguez at pick 10.
Pick 11, Sydney.
That'll be me as well. I think I'm trying to also remember how we've moved all these picks around. I think you might just be done, given you've had 2 Essendon and 2 Richmond. You were going to take Gold Coast, but obviously that gets taken up as well. So I've actually got the last few picks here. At the end of the draft, Sydney is going to be a bit of a fascinating one, because they probably won't have this pick, but nor are we envisaging that a bid is going to come for one of their academy kids. We probably will I'll put Max King down for this selection, because I think he is who they will take with their first selection on the draft, not having to
albeit via a bid.
Albeit by matching a bid. If they were to be looking to the open pool, though, I'd be taking Mitch Marsh with this selection. I think they just want something at either end of the field. The key defensive options probably aren't there for them this early into the draft.
Well, it's funny you say that, because if I had Sydney's pick here, I would put a bid on for Harry Dean and make Carlton pay up.
I can't say that I didn't think about it. It would be really interesting to see if the Swans would go for that early, and I don't think that's out of place for where he would be in the order. But I would like a key defender for the Swans. At the same time, they're getting some moving pieces with their academies. But if they are picking from the open pool, I'd be taking Mitch Marsh. But in this, we'll have Max King down as them for their first pick at what is pick 11. And to round out the draft, pick 12, the Western Bulldogs are going to take Mitch Marsh. They do have quite a nice package of forwards with Aaron Norton, Sam Darcy, Jordan Croft coming through, but he is a different type of forward than what we're seeing. And at the same time, a lot of what we'll be picking, or what we have picked, is the best available talent, which is what a lot of clubs do follow. Sydney are one of them as well. And having Mitch Marsh as probably the best available talent, or thereabouts in my eyes, they'll take Mitch Marsh, who at that lowish 190s probably can grow to mid 190s centimetre forward. I think it will complement the skyscrapers that are Sam Darcy and Aaron Norton. So another forward for them. They've certainly also used Jordan Croft in more of a defensive role, and I think key defenders again is something that the Dogs might be looking at, and they too could be one that matches a bid for Harry Dean, Carlton's father-son. But looking elsewhere, I think if they look in more of an open pool selection for them, I've got them taking Mitch Marsh at pick 12.
Yep. I think the one player, if we have a little bit of a discussion overall, so just to recap what we've done, you took Willem Dersma with pick 1 via West Coast. I took Cooper Duff Tytler and Sam Grill to Richmond with pick 2 and 3 respectively. You put a bid on Dan Annable via St Kilda at pick 5, then took Josh Lindsay. I, acting as Essendon, put bids on Zeke Hewland and Dylan Patterson before taking Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves and Sam Cumming, and then you via Hawthorn took Fred Rodriguez at pick 10. Acting as Sydney, obviously Max King, and then at 12, Mitch Marsh at pick 12 for the Western Bulldogs. I think the one player that I look at that neither of us picked that's quite interesting is Ollie Greaves.
It was the first name that came to mind. Yeah. I assumed he was going to get picked just given the names I had for the early clubs. Yeah. And then it was probably going to be a bit different when I got to obviously Sydney, but Hawthorn and the Western Bulldogs, and obviously Hawthorn have had some links to Ollie Greaves this year. But I went down the Fred Rodriguez. I thought he just brings a different set of values compared to what they already have. And I assumed Ollie Greaves might have been taken a lot earlier if maybe some of those that weren't available, if that makes sense, with some of the early picks. And he's one that could slide, but at the same time could be taken by the Saints at pick 3 or 4. I think 4 or 5.
And it comes down to a lot of this, obviously, who has the picks of these clubs, which clubs have the picks rather, because we've had him consistently in the power rankings top 5, and I think he's certainly there, particularly after what he's done at the National Championships. He's in line to be very close to winning Vic Metro's MVP as the big-bodied midfielder of the draft pool. But from a point of view, I think Richmond don't need a big-bodied midfielder given what they picked up last year, and Essendon much the same. So he was one that I just ended up overlooking. I would have taken Willem Dersma at Richmond if given the opportunity. So that was one that you took that caused me to have to do a little bit of lateral thinking, I suppose, but I did obviously have a couple of backup options, and it sounds like Sam Grill that I took at Richmond caused you to do some lateral thinking from a St Kilda point of view.
Hawthorn I had probably putting a bid on for Patterson or Hewland, which you did right before that with Essendon. I then had Sam Grill, Josh Lindsay and Sam Cumming, who were just about the 3 players taken before them. So I had to kind of dive a little deeper. And similar for the Western Bulldogs, I did have Mitch Marsh pretty high up, knowing that the players that I would have taken already don't need to be in the Dogs' list. But Sam Cumming was up there. Dyson Sharp was there or thereabouts, another one that missed out. Fred Rodriguez, and then Lockie Doverston was also one towards the bottom end of the list, which it would have probably been some extraordinary circumstances to get to that point. But I did start coming around to the idea of Lockie Doverston and the Dogs. And then Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves was another one also in contention for the Western Bulldogs.
I think if Richmond had picked 9, 10, 11, 12 rather than 2 and 3, I would have really closely considered Lockie Doverston there with some of the talent that would already have been off the board, given they probably don't have that really young small forward. Taj Houghton, yes, but he'll graduate into the midfield we expect, but that traditional front and centre forward. But an interesting discussion nonetheless. And as draft draws nearer, we'll continue to do these different hypotheticals, so keep an eye out. We'll kind of maybe ramp these up. Obviously, when we have the first 10 selections at the end of the home and away season, we might dive back into this. Whether we do a new one or we kind of just look at what we've did today and maybe pivot a little bit here and there. But we'll love to hear what everyone else thinks in the comments as well. Let's roll on to some of the action that was over the weekend. Vic Metro versus the Allies. Another comfortable win for Vic Metro. Allies not finishing their carnival on a high note. We probably both saw them as a top contender for this year's under-18s champs, but plenty of talk for Vic Metro and plenty of talk about Adam Swade, probably his best performance of the champs, Essendon's NGA talent, and he was one of many standouts for the winning side. Yeah, he certainly was. I thought a couple of the goals that he kicked were absolutely unbelievable, and I think speaking to people is maybe a little bit of a question over how far he can actually kick, like how much depth it actually has. Because when we see him, it's usually sort of 35 to 40 meters. But those 2 kicks on the run, basically from the arc of 50, were really, really impressive. Showed his finishing polished, and he had the game that I think we wanted him to have at the championships. He deserved to have a really big game off the back of some really hard work in pre-season, off the back of an ACL, and applied himself. Probably more on the offensive end was where he was really, really impactful, but we know what he can do defensively as well in the midfield with his closing speed. But his connection forward was absolutely elite and a big part of that big win. And for Essendon fans who he's tied to via their Next Generation Academy, they would have loved seeing Hassan Al-Ashkar as well, whose power and ability to break tackles made him such a dangerous threat in the forward half, particularly probably in that first half when the game was on the line.
Yeah, there was a nice mix in the front half. I also want to shout out Oscar Ainsworth. You probably look at the stat line, he probably doesn't jumping off the page, but he put a lot of pressure on to also create some scoring opportunities throughout that match as more of a taller presence. But then when you've got Adam Swade, Al-Ashkar, both roaming, plus Lockie Doverston and Ty Gresham also having strong games, that was an absolute menace for the Allies defenders. And as we've talked about a little bit, Lockie Doverston being one of those top performers, the only non-club tied one between him, Gresham, Al-Ashkar and Swade, is really what's helping him stand out as well as an open pool prospect. Yeah,
just finds ways to have shots on goal consistently, and to do it as well as he has in a position where you can go missing for a quarter, a half, even a game is ultra impressive, and is going to, like we talked about with the mock draft, could cause his value to skyrocket where there aren't necessarily too many small forwards. But it was more for me in terms of small forwards. Yes, we know what Lockie Doverston can provide. Yes, we know Hassan Al-Ashkar's been good this year. Tyson Gresham was one that had the game that he probably needed to have just to really confirm his draft status and show Carlton fans in particular, as a member of their Next Generation Academy, what they could be getting if they draft him. 20 disposals, 2 goals. That came after 3 goals for the Northern Knights last week. He was part of the rotation system, so missed one of Metro's games, and it felt like every time he touched the ball in the forward half, it was leading to a scoring opportunity for Vic Metro. So ultra impressive, and we know how tough he is. He applied himself really well at the contest, and when the ball got into a little bit of space, he was able to really punish the opponents either on scoreboard or by setting his teammates up. Yeah,
a couple other standouts for Metro. Ollie Greaves, again, like you said just before, probably a front runner for their MVP at this point, just given his consistency across their 3 games so far. Xavier Taylor and Max Kondo-Giannis. The latter probably a name that you flagged on this show a while ago as being one to watch this year, and he's having quite a chance after entering at the certain status he did and what he's probably going to leave at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a Max Kondo-Giannis perspective, he's really quietly but undeniably enhanced his draft stocks throughout this carnival. The first game, under a lot of pressure, South Australia absolutely annihilated Vic Metro, but he was one that still won some really important one-on-one contests and gave a good account of himself throughout the day, was probably their best defender. And in the last 2 games, his intercepting has really come to the fore. So he's still quite a raw prospect. If a club was to take him, they'd have to put 18 months to 2 years of work into him to strengthen him up and get him ready for the rigors of AFL footy. But he's certainly got some likeable attributes about him, reads the game really well. And should be noted, there was a month gap between the first Metro game and then the second and the thirds, which have been played in consecutive style. He didn't play a game in that period with a little finger injury. So to be able to come in and then have the impact that he has had at the high level, really, really impressive. And I do hope he gets drafted. And Xavier Taylor just continues doing what Xavier Taylor does. Louis Emmett, a bit of a tick for him as well. I liked his game. I thought he was probably the best of the tools across the day. And then from an Allies point of view, Caden McNamara for me was best on ground. I thought he was a really dynamic front half presence, took some important marks, won some one-on-ones, kicked some goals, and felt like it was going to be a bit of a shootout in the first half. And what he was providing them with his liveliness was certainly a big part of that.
It's obviously hard to find standouts for the Allies that aren't club tied.
Yeah.
So I was saying McNamara being one with the Swans, Printable as well, Dan Annable, Dill Patterson, another strong game, Lockie Carmichaels, all those Northern Academy kids putting in strong performances to finish off for the Allies. Maybe a name from that mix might be their MVP. I don't think that's been announced yet. Who would be your tip, do you think?
I'd go Lockie Carmichael by a hair ahead of Dan Annable. I think both of them consistent across the 4 games. Dan Annable, very deserving. Obviously, we know the intangibles with his leadership. Lockie Carmichael's improvement probably is what does it for me. Came into the champs as a potential late first round selection, and then to finish the champs not only as a really reliable halfback, but then get those midfield minutes. I think that just shows how highly he is now rated. So all kudos go to the Sydney Swans Academy prospect there. It was good to see him finish his champs on a good note. And Tyan Prindable, you touched on him, but yeah, he needs a shout out because I think his last 2 or 3 games of the champs in particular,
back end was really strong.
Really, and probably came into the champs as one that certainly wasn't a draft certainty, but now it'll be hard to overlook him with his form at the top level.
Yeah, adding into the calculations. Now we wrap up the Under-18s National Championships this weekend, as we do most years, with Vic Country and Vic Metro going head-to-head at Moorabbin on Sunday.
Exciting.
Yeah, we might not have the finish that we had last year, and it all coming down to the final kick of the carnival. But there will be a bit of feeling in this. Obviously, very different squads, mostly just about every player. Maybe Louis Emmett and Willem Dersma were among those I think that featured last year. But there might be a bit of feeling, and it always is when it's got the 2 Vic clubs going head-to-head.
Absolutely. There's a few players here in particular that I think will be looking for big games. I'm going to reel off some of those players, and it's not as though they've had poor championships to date, but coming into the national championships, they're probably seen as higher valued players than what they've necessarily produced so far.
Okay.
And they would love to enhance their stocks in the last games. So Tom Burton, one of the co-captains of the side, absolutely love what he's done at the Western Jets, by the way, but has had some midfield minutes. I think he's played on the wing a little bit as well. We know he can play off half back. He is one that has the capabilities to really match it at this level and has had some solid performances, but I think he could go to the next level. Sam Grill, another co-captain, has actually been quite good, but yeah, there's another level for him to go to, which we've seen at Coast Talent League level. Louis Emmett, big tick for him on the weekend, but I think he really deserves that big game where he really stuffs the stats sheet, and if he's able to do it on the weekend, that would be a big statement in what we talk about is always a hotly contested match between these two sides. Tom McGuan, the Collingwood Tide prospect, has been played on the wing quite a lot, has been played in the forward line a little bit as well. Be good to see him play a strong game. Hunter Holmes, and then from a Vic Country point of view, Tyron Armour has had some really big starts, and there's no doubt that his value has increased as a result of what he's shown in the first half of the last 2 Vic Country games. If you can piece it together for a full game though, and get that big 5 or 6 goal haul, that would be much deserving for how good he's looked, not only at Vic Country level, but also for the Stingrays and Haileybury College. Toby Cinema has some traits on the wing, Melbourne Next Generation Academy. I think he really deserves to have a big game. And then Noah Hibbins-Hargreaves started the carnival with a bang, obviously had those 2 goals in the last quarter against WA and was a big part of them being as close as they were for as long as they were, but then has sort of faded through the middle of the carnival. So let's see him finish it with a bang. Obviously, I think he's a potential top 10, top 15 talent.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see him bookend those. Yeah, a few names that you mentioned, as you said, have been good, but just probably deserve that big showcase game. And what better way to do it in the final game between the 2 Vic clubs? Where do you think the game is won? Because I think you probably favour Vic Metro, just given the form they've brought in since that first game. And Country have obviously been a little up and down, but they're also coming off a win as well over the Allies. Where do you kind of see this one unfolding? Yeah,
well, obviously they say it's won and lost in the midfield. I guess from a Vic Country point of view, Riley Onley and Cal Smith will really lead the way in there. We know that they've both had sod carnivals. Riley Onley's last game was terrific. Cal Smith's been bankable all the way through. And then from a Vic Metro point of view, Ollie Greaves has been the man that stood up in each of their games so far. But I think the most important player across either of the sides on the day is actually Harry Dean in defence for Vic Country. We know once the ball hits the deck in Vic Metro's forward line, we saw it on the weekend, and I think we've seen it consistently, that they're very, very hard to stop. They've got Lockie Doverston, they've got Tyson Gresham, they've got Jai Saxoner, and they've got Hussein Al-Ashkar as well, not to mention the fact that Harry Dean will be playing on a very, very highly rated key forward as well. So he needs to be at his intercepting best to allow Vic Country, I think, the opportunity to not concede a score that they're not going to be able to beat.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think that end of the ground is going to be important. I tell you what, I wouldn't mind though. Take Willem Dersma out of there and put him up forward.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? Yeah, I think, for my entertainment.
I think he's done more than enough down back. And I think just given the height of Metro's defenders, Kondogiannis, Taylor, Buck aren't that tall, he actually might stand out. As one of the tallest in that forward line and be a real spearhead for them. So I reckon that might be a nice option. Him and Mu certainly offer differing traits.
Jesse Muller up there as well.
And Muller as well as
Hugo
another kind of ground level threat. So I would like to see that. Whether we see that or not, don't know. But it could be a case of game on the line. They throw him in the middle or up forward to really just keep themselves in it.
Something Gippsland haven't been shy of doing so far this year on a couple of occasions.
Let's get into some weekend highlights. You were actually at Gippsland versus Colders game over the weekend. What'd you take out of that?
Yeah, well, what I took out of that is Zach O'Keefe wanted to make a statement and return for Vic Country's last game of the championships against Vic Metro. He was absolutely terrific, clinical in the midfield, 27 disposals, plenty of clearances as well. It felt like every time there was a centre bounce and Gippsland won it, it was off the back of some work that Zach O'Keefe was doing so clean and composed and was able to burst out the front of stoppage. Both teams were missing a lot of guns. So Calder's captain, Hamish Bird, was missing. Two pick one contenders in Kripaduff Tytler and Willem Dersma were missing, as was Brody Atkins, who's obviously in Vic Country's squad as well, rested. And then those Calder players, Kripaduff Tytler obviously played on the Sunday for Vic Metro. So there were some players missing. Zach O'Keefe looked a class above. That was the big thing I took out. Next year, Sam Harris, North Melbourne fans, one to watch. Yeah. Daniel Harris's son, he was best on ground. It came off the back of two really, really strong Coates League games heading into this one, and the way he covers the ground, his pressure, his tenacity and his skills are absolutely terrific, and he really spearheaded that midfield group that got on top of Gippsland in the second half with some players missing. So it was quite young in there from a Calder Cannons perspective. Levi West was another one in there, the older brother, or the younger brother rather, of Riley West at the Dogs, and when he was in the front half of the ground, he was a real threat as well. So those were probably the three. And Ollie Wilson, just a shout out to him, intercepting force down back, took lots of intercept marks, particularly in the last quarter, to keep Gippsland in it for until really the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game. Yes, it was a 31-point margin, but it felt a lot closer to that. A lot of that down to Ollie Wilson. So been in great form for Caulfield and very, very good for Gippsland on the weekend.
I think it's time we probably gave Charlie McKinnon a shout out.
Yeah.
Just sticking with the CTL for a second, 36 goals in 9 games, so 4 to boot, hauls of 8 and 7. He had another 5 on the weekend, and it's going to be probably one of the bigger goal campaigns we've seen in the Coates Talent League for some time. It's unbelievable to think about how many goals he could get to. And I had a chat to him earlier in the year, and it was quite interesting to hear him talk about the fact, and I understand why he's talking about it, having watched a couple of his first games that he played in the season, that he felt like he'd been a little bit inaccurate, hadn't made the most of his opportunity. So if you think his goal stocks could have been proliferated even further had he been accurate, then it's unbelievable where he could be. But if you target him deep, he is going to take a mark, and he's going to kick usually a goal, but definitely a score. But he's probably the most dangerous threat 0 to 20 meters out in the Coates League. It's just for him, probably adding some other aspects to his game. So there's only
he's brilliant.
Yeah, there's only 2 other players averaging 4 goals this year. One's Jake Miller, the double bottom major who debuted a few weeks ago.
He only played the one game.
And has played one game. And Jack Pickett, who's another one we mentioned in the past month, who had 7 over the weekend.
Yeah, huge game.
He's had 11 in his last 2. I think he's had 16 in 4 games now.
Yep.
So, and another bottom major. So as far as draftable talent this year, Charlie McKinnon, head and shoulders outside and on top of the goal kicking tally. So he's 36. I think the next best is Lockie Doverston with 22 in as many games. So he's going 2.5 goals, or just under 2.5 goals. So it was just worth giving a shout out to Charlie McKinnon off the back of another big haul.
And the other thing is, we talked about Vic Metro versus Vic Country before, but it'd be really interesting which of Jack Pickett or Will Melody are the sort of second 195 centimetre plus key forward in that Vic Country lineup, because Will Melody in the third quarter had some huge moments, huge contested marks, important goals, and he finished with the 3 goals, had enormous impact with his pack crashing. But then you can't really overlook someone who's kicked 7 goals for the Geelong Falcons either, can you? So, that'll be a hard decision that they'll make, but certainly there's bright futures for both of them heading into 2026.
Yeah, one thing for sure is Vic Country's forward line for next year is looking quite nice with everything they're piecing together. Just a couple of other highlights. Archie Butler, also in the Coates Talent League, 5 goals over the weekend as a bottom major. He could return to Vic Metro's squad this weekend, and he's, I think, now got 14 goals for the year, which is putting him in a nice position going into his draft year next year. Sam Cumming, we thought he had a good debut last week. He's had an absolutely stellar second game to back it up in the sample for North Adelaide. 20 touches, 3 goals. In another loss, I think it was, not as heavy as the first week against Sturt, but coming up against South Adelaide, and it was a really good performance to see at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just worth mentioning that Charlie Orchard made his VFL debut, has been played as an interceptor almost exclusively for the Dandenong Stingrays in the last couple of years, but went forward for the Sandringham Zebras, and with the game on the line in the last quarter, kicked a couple of goals, 3 goals in total for his day. So his second game at the level, and certainly looked promising, which is really good to see. Overlooked last year in the draft, got a state combine invite, so he's viewed quite highly. And currently, we have the Under-16s Championships taking place on the Gold Coast. We will go into much greater depth next week when those championships are over, and we do have a much clearer picture of who has performed across the entire championships. But worth giving a shout out to a few players so far. So Louis Salopek from Vic Country is certainly one to watch. Harper McCullough, Archie Bakulis in the first game was very, very strong as an intercepting machine. Angus West, very, very watchable with his pace. Zemus Pilot from South Australia as well, and Jake Miller doesn't need much of the footy, but every time it goes in his area, he's taken mark. So there's a few names to watch. Consider it an entree for next week.
Yeah, Max Thompson as well. I'm really liking what he's doing for Vic Country. So a bit more to unpack. Next part of our AFL club by club draft preview for 2025, we're chatting the Melbourne Demons.
We are.
Bit of an interesting one for them. No first round pick, will potentially finish bottom 6. I think that trade that they did last year, I can't remember all of the parts, but trading their first rounder this year for a first rounder last year, which was tied to Essendon, I think has paid off. I think the talent they got in Xavier Lindsay and where he might have sit if he was a year younger and playing the footy he did last year.
Almost picked 1 this year.
That's what I'm saying. I think they've done well in that regard. I think there might have been some later picks swapping hands. I can't remember if those might have gone to Essendon, but they do have picks 24, 53 and 60, so it's only 649 points. I think it's the third fewest behind only Carlton and Collingwood. They do have some club tie talent, which we'll touch on in a sec, but they're in a window where they probably want a top pick this year as well. It's probably not the worst draft to miss out on, but we are seeing a good amount of depth emerging, that when they are first on the clock with pick 24, which might be pick 30, when we actually get to draft night, they might have a pretty good talent to pick from with their first selection.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll touch on the club tie talent before we dive into that. Kalani White, key position swingman. He's also tied to the Gold Coast, but there is an assumption that he's going to go down the Melbourne route, which is where his dad, Jeff, is a legend of the club. And he will go somewhere in the second round, I think you'd say, at this point. Obviously, things can change between now and draft night. But, really good in the air. Got the opportunity to play for Casey and was a big part of their win 5 or 6 weeks ago against Essendon VFL. Kicked some crucial late goals, got the ability to play back. And then Toby Cinema, a pacey athletic winger who runs all day and has a lethal left foot as well, will give them some outside dynamism. So those are the 2 players from a club tied point of view for Melbourne. But on the open pool, they'll certainly have the opportunity to take someone with that pick 24, because I'm not sure that either of those players will have been bid on.
No, I don't think so. I think White, second half of the draft, maybe. Cinema, potentially a Cat B option for them. They both got to train with Melbourne over the preseason and got some pretty handy advice when Kalani's getting to learn off Max Gorn, which he'll likely do a bit next year. And Cinema, I've really liked some moments from him as that 60 metre out, 70 metre out player, who's being able to deliver some nice clean kicks into the forward 50. So they've both been quite impressive. I remember Jace Taylor speaking on draft night last year about Kalani and saying that there's upside there that the club's looking forward to if he does become a Demon. But they were really happy with what he had done over his last couple of years, and this year certainly hasn't hurt his draft stocks. From a list needs point of view, I think a key defender or a key forward. Their key position options have been lacking. I was thinking ruckman as well, but I don't think they'll go to the draft for a ruckman. No. I think it's more of a mature recruit type option for the Demons. So Kalani White certainly could fit either of those, but I don't really want to have him in this conversation just yet, and more looking at the open pool prospects they could have for a key defender or a key forward. And I think a pick 24, as we've mentioned, Xavier Taylor and Max Kondo-Giannis, probably the former there might be in that mix if it's a nice kind of draft night for the Demons at pick between pick 24, pick 30.
Yep.
Little undersized though, but I think he might be a nice fit.
Yep. A couple of later selections as well if they wanted to take best available talent at pick 24. Lockie Carpenter from Western Australia. I think Caleb Nankoro will get drafted, and whether Gold Coast match a bid or not remains to be seen, because we know that they've got so many others that they have to match a bid on. Avery Thomas has impressed me in the last couple of games for the Allies, and I loved what he did at the start of the season for Tassie as well. So an athletic defender. I think I agree with you in terms of the list needs, but I would take someone of note down back, particularly with athleticism. Yeah. So that athletic third tall intercepting type to replace what they've had so bankably for the last 4 or 5 years. So those are some names to throw out there. And then obviously Elliot Duffield is another name from South Australia we can't forget about.
Yeah, clean kicking, as you said, athletic defender with that kind of profile's nice. Key forwards, again, that 24 to 30 range. I don't know if Aleem Heatherton might kind of slide that far. Mitch Marsh, Aiden Schubert, Archie Ludovic, unlikely.
They'll be
obviously
higher.
Taran Armu was one that they have in their next generation academy, but not one that they can match a bid for in this year's draft. So there's a bit of an asterisk on that one, but no, they won't have priority access to a player like that. But I think a key forward, another one for them, and Liam Heatherton maybe. Like they do have Jefferson Van Rooyen, but I think just another one to kind of help support them.
And they do have Dan Turner as well.
Should be
more down back. I mean, and I think he'll complement whoever they draft in, if they draft in a tall defender quite well. But I still reckon some support for him would go a long way.
Yeah, I think maybe they could go a medium forward. Like we have been talking about Charlie McKinnon, 190 centimeters. Jake Melksham is carrying that forward line at the moment at the age of 34. Bailey Fritsch is if he's on 28, is he a long-term option for them? Probably not. So they could look at Charlie McKinnon maybe with a later pick in the draft.
North Melbourne, they've got picks 20, 21, 39, 57. We know they were the talk of the closing stages of draft night 1 last year when they obviously made that bid, famous or infamous, time will tell, with Richmond. Their list needs, I think, for me, it's very clear that they need a small forward. They need someone at the feet of their tools, and when it gets into the front end of the ground, that they can rely on to kick some goals, but also small forward who, you talked about it with Toby Cinema, when he's 70 metres out, he's going to hit a target. Someone like that for North Melbourne who's going to deliver it really well inside 50. Doesn't necessarily have to be a midfielder, but someone who is a really important connecting option, high half forward type. So obviously you talk your traditional small forwards. I think Lockie Doverston's the clear prototype that they'd love to get at pick 20, which becomes 26, 27 probably. He's not going to be available. So Zane Piker's one that might be on the board.
Luke
from
Hallett
South
from
Australia.
WA.
Hudson Walker, another one. So, there's some options.
Yeah, there is probably just like that. They're really strong at the top. You talk about Al Ashkar.
And they're all club tied.
Less so Adam Swade, but Al Ashkar. But so Lockie Doverson would be the one.
Yeah.
But like you said, I don't think he's going to be available when they're on the clock. They do have back-to-back selections, which is always nice.
Yeah.
Straight after West Coast's opening pick for the second round. So that period there is a lot of demand, but don't really see them trading out.
Yeah.
Given the moves they made last year. So, will be quite interesting. I think, key forward or small forward.
Yep.
And if the small forwards are more lacking at that period of the draft with where they want to be looking, like Hudson Walker maybe, but I'd like to think that maybe a key forward does a Schubert slide. Maybe Mitch Marsh, don't know. Again, Liam Heatherton, again, Archie Ludovic. The other thing is they could potentially package those two picks, but I don't know how many clubs will be looking to move 2 early second rounders into a 13, 14 range for this year's draft, unless there is someone on the clock available and they can make their move on draft night. But we did see what they did last year and giving up pick 3 for Matt Whitlock, and then at the same time they do have Richmond's second round this year and that deal. So that's why they do have those 2 picks. So there's a few moving parts here for North Melbourne potentially, but we're yet to see that obviously trade played last year pay off.
Worth noting as well, I touched on it earlier that they've got Sam Harris next year, who could be a highly regarded talent. So how his season sort of finishes, the attributes he show are worth tracking, because North Melbourne might have to get busy next year to get some points for him. So they want to be a little bit careful about that.
Yeah, they do have Archie Grant this year. I think he played in Sandringham's grand final side last year, if I'm not mistaken. He didn't? Did he miss out on that one?
Yeah.
Well, he's played, I think, 3 or 4 games this year. One to keep an eye on, but we'll see how the rest of his kind of season pans out. The other thing for them is, I think we've talked about this, or I've talked about this for probably the past 3 or 4 drafts for North Melbourne, is every time they've been on at the pointy end of the draft, they've probably wanted a key position player, but have never taken one. And I think if they had pick 3 this year, it would still be interesting to see if they would go Mitch Marsh, Hayden Schubert, Archie Ludwig that early.
Cooper Duff Tyler's there.
Cooper Duff Tyler would have been an option for them. They took Taylor Goad a couple of years ago and have Tristan Sherry, but they would have had some flexibility there at the very least. So, like me, thought they might have last year splitting an early selection, getting Alex Taru and another player in. That could have been an option for them this year, but they got what they wanted in Matt Whitlock on top of Finn O'Sullivan last year. So, they'll be interesting. They're not going to be where they have been in the last few years, but they'll have a couple of early second-round selections, and that'll be something to look forward to.
One more name I want to put on the radar that could be in that range if they're looking for a key is Taj Murray. I absolutely loved
I don't mind that.
Yeah, I absolutely loved his first game for the Allies. I think there was a lot of people that did. There was so much X factor to what he does as a tall, can play forward, can play in the ruck, as we know he's been the starting ruck when he's played for the Allies, and we haven't seen it, but there is a belief that he could go back and impact as well. So we know North Melbourne have got a fair few of those swingman types, but he brings elite A-grade class. Yeah,
probably worth mentioning Cody Curtin. Like a chance maybe to slip to the second round, a chance. Don't know if that'll definitely happen, but if he's there, top available, nice list fit, can play ruck, can play back. And they just need someone to kind of help Nick Larkey a little bit.
That'll do us, I reckon, Mitch. Good to chat. Good to get a mock draft on the record as well. Plenty of highlights from the weekend. Really looking forward next week to wrapping up all things under 16s and all things Vic Country versus Vic Metro under 18s. Before we go, a quick tip, Metro or Country?
I'll go Metro. I'll say 5 goals.
And I'll say Metro by 3 goals. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Head to Zero Hanger for your fix of AFL content and stay up to date with Craft of the Draft on social media.